Hi everyone, this is Crystal and I'm back with another project using the October Life Crafted at My Table kit from Citrus Twist Kits. This time I'm working in a traveler's notebook. So this is a traveler's notebook that's documenting kind of the second half of 2019. I've just done 2 so far this year. I will likely not do any more than 2 this year. So that's the one I'm working in. The insert is from Webster's Pages. It's a lined insert. And that usually doesn't bother me. I don't mind the lines, but this time you'll see I will end up covering them up. So I'm starting by doing some repeat stamping. So I have a piece of just printer paper, this just thin copy paper that I took out of my printer. And I've cut it down to the size of the notebook, which is approximately 4 1/4 inches by 8 1/4 inches. And I'm going to do some stamping. So my plan is to cover this entire page with stamps. So I have the stamp set from the At My Table Life Crafted kit. I also have the This Is Life Food Stories kit. That's the one I'm looking at right now. And I believe I'm also using the Traveler's Notebook stamp from October. So I have all 3 of those stamp sets out on my desk. I've just gone through each one and pulled out stamps that I think will work. So my spread today is going to be about a pumpkin cream cold brew that I bought at Starbucks. I'm not a big fan of pumpkin spice lattes, but I'd heard good things about the pumpkin cream cold brew, so I thought I would give it a try. We were at the farmer's market. It was a beautiful Saturday morning, and there's a Starbucks right on our town square, so I decided to go ahead and try it, and it was actually really good. So I took a picture and decided to document it. So I've pulled out a bunch of different stamps, including the pumpkin spice latte stamp from the At My Table Life Crafted kit stamp. But I've taken off the latte part. So I just took a sharp scissors and just cut around the word latte, so it just says pumpkin spice. Since this wasn't a latte, it was a pumpkin cold brew, I didn't want the word latte on there, and I don't mind doing that. It's fine to cut into your stamps. You can kind of piece them together if you want to use them as a whole stamp later on. It doesn't hurt them at all. So I just carefully trimmed around latte, and now I just have a stamp that says pumpkin spice. I'm also using the Heck Yes stamp set from the Traveler's Notebook stamp, the Fall Story stamp from the Traveler's Notebook stamp, and I'll also use the Yummy and the Sweet Treat and the Fall Fave, and of course that coffee cup, which is on the Food Stories, This Is Life Food Stories stamp set. So I just am choosing ones that kind of work with this type of layout, right? With a coffee layout. So anything that has to do with coffee or with fall or with having something as a sweet treat, because that's really what it was. It's not something I do every day. So I'm just, I started with the biggest stamps, and I stamped them kind of periodically across the page, and then took the next biggest stamp and did the same thing, and I'm just working my way down to the smallest stamp. So that way I'll be sure to have lots of room for the big ones, and then be able to fill in all the little extra spaces with the smaller stamps. So that's what I'm doing. It does take a little bit of time, but it's really a simple process, and you end up with a really cool effect at the end. It's kind of like creating your own pattern paper. The ink that I'm using is from Hero Arts. It's a soft brown dye ink. And I do have a paper behind my page. That way I can stamp off the edges without it getting all over my desk. That just helps it look more like a pattern paper. If you take some of the stamps off the edge of the paper that you're stamping on, it helps it just look like it had continued, like you cut it out of something larger, which gives it that pattern paper look. So I'm just now filling in with all the little tiny stamps that I have, just making sure that there are no large gaps, and that I don't have 2 of the same stamp right next to each other either. I want to make sure that it looks, like something you would purchase, like a pattern paper. So I'm nearly done, and once that is done, I will go ahead and adhere it to the right side of my notebook, and then that's all that's going to happen on the right side. It's just going to be this kind of DIY pattern paper that I created, and that's it. That's going to be enough. I don't think it needs really any more than that. Okay, so I am all done, and I can start to adhere things down. You'll see I thought for a minute about putting it on the left side instead of the right side, but I really liked it better on the right side, so that's where it's going to end up going. And right now I'm just kind of testing out some other papers from the kit that I think might work on this spread before I adhere anything down. So to adhere this into the notebook, the way I like to do it is to just put a line of glue down the inside edge of the paper I'm gluing down, and get that edge lined up where it needs to be. I don't want it all the way into the crease of the book, or it will kind of bend and crinkle. So I'm making sure to leave just a little bit of space, and once I have that edge lined up, then I can add adhesive to the rest of the page and kind of smooth it down to get it all adhered. You'll see here in a second I'll do the same thing on the left side. I had thought about leaving the stripes or the lines on the left side, but it just didn't quite look right. I felt like it really needed to have a white background, so I ended up just using another piece of copy paper that I had cut down already, and I will cover the left side of the page with that just to make it match the right side. So there is that paper, and you'll see I do the same thing here, just adding a line of glue across the inside edge, line that up, and then glue down the rest of it. Once I have that in place, I can start adding the layers behind my photo. So I've decided just to use some torn paper. I used 2 of the pages, or the papers, the 6x8 papers from the Life Crafted kit. I have one that's kind of a craft colored paper with a grid on it, and then I have that one that is kind of orange and a peachy orange stripe. And I've just torn off the edges of both of those, and I'm going to use those behind my photo. So I also have a few pieces from the die cut ephemera that were in the At My Table Life Crafted kit, as well as the cut apart sheet. That's a cut apart sheet that subscribers get. It's a digital file that you can print at home and either fussy cut or cut by hand, which is what I do. You can see right there I'm cutting one of the little pieces from that. I had thought about using that die cut that says love, but I just couldn't get it to work on the page. I end up going with this label that says today's story. That's from the cut apart sheet. But first I'm going to back my photo. So I'm going to use the yellow paper from the Life Crafted kit to add a border around my photo, just a really thin border. You can see I'm sticking to the very warm fall tones that are in this kit, so yellows, oranges, browns, keeping that kind of narrow color scheme in mind. I'm also going to use a little frame that was in the die cut pack. You can see that in the top right corner of my photo, but I will actually end up cutting that in half and using it on opposite corners of my photo, so it kind of looks like photo corners or just another layer behind my photo instead of an actual frame. I'm also using that little flag from the cut apart sheet with the coffee cup on it. I thought that was just too perfect not to use for this spread. And then I'm going to use a label from the label cut aparts that come in the kit, and then a heart from the die cut pack, as well as a tab from the die cut pack, and I think that's going to be it. So I'll also sprinkle around a few puffy hearts, because how can I not? Those puffy hearts are just too perfect not to use. There you saw me cut apart that frame. So I just kind of cut it in half, and then I'm going to round the edges of the side that I cut so it looks the same as the half that was already rounded. And then I added those to opposite corners, like I said, just to give it another layer, and it kind of looks a little bit like photo corners that way. So I've added that label behind my photo and the tab as well. I'm going to stamp on both of those before I adhere them down into the book. It's a bit easier to stamp outside of the book than it is once it's glued down inside the book. So I added the pumpkin stamp to the little yellow tab, and I'm going to add the fall fave stamp to the orange label. Those are stamps that I used on the other side, so it just kind of echoes that pattern that's on the right hand side and brings it over to the left hand side, kind of ties everything together using the same ink. And then I'm going to add the label that says today's stories to the bottom, and that's where my journaling is going to go. I'm not doing a lot of journaling, really just what fits on that label, so just labeling it as a pumpkin cream cold brew, and there's a little date and @ symbol, so I just wrote the date and @Starbucks. And that's really it for journaling. I feel like that's really all this page needs. It's just a page about coffee. There was, nothing much more to say than that. So I thought about using that little circle die cut from the cut apart sheet, and you can see I've already trimmed it down, and once you've trimmed it down, it's really hard to get it into a punch to punch the circle out. So I just cut a strip of scrap paper and adhered it to the back of that circle, and then I'm able to use the scrap paper to hold it in place and get the punch in the exact right spot, and then punch out that circle. But I don't end up actually using it. It didn't look quite right on the page once I had it cut out, so I will end up using that on another page later on. But that's just a little trick in case you run into the same problem and aren't able to use your punch on something you've already trimmed out. Okay, so I think I'm pretty happy with how it looks. I'm going to go ahead and adhere down that cluster to the right hand side of my page, and then stick a couple of these puffy stickers down in 3 different places around the page, and then that's going to be it. So it was a super simple page, even though the stamping took a little bit of time. Ultimately, it came together really quickly. I've sped this up about 3 times, so less than a half an hour to get the whole thing done, which is not bad. Here are some close-up photos. I hope you've enjoyed this process and maybe found some inspiration as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all back here soon.